So you go from a church with 4 people in it, and it's your family.
Yep. Yeah.
And you're in a funeral chapel?
Yeah. This didn't happen very often, but, so we'd have to close the lid of the casket. I mean, the funeral director would come and, we'd take them to the casket storage room or something.
And now you have a church that has virtually 24,000.
It really mostly is one person telling another person, hey, I found this to really impact my life in a positive way. Would you like to come with me?
There's Just Something About Kansas City is brought to you by the generosity of our friends with the Haverty family, the Illig family, the Kearney-Warnell Foundation, UMB Bank trustee, the Sherman family, the Cockrell family, Kansas City Orthopedic Institute, Don and Mary Doherty, and the Bergman family. Thank you.
Welcome once again to another episode of There's Just Something About Kansas City. I'm your host, Frank Bohl. Don't forget, you can pick this up on Spotify or anywhere you get your podcast, and you can also watch us on YouTube. Sitting across from me today, a man I've known for a long time since I've been here in Kansas City, the founding pastor of the Church of the Resurrection, United Methodist Church of the Resurrection, Adam Hamilton. Adam, thanks so much for sharing some of your time with us.
Well, Frank, it's a thrill for me to sit here with you and across from you. I've watched you for years, and I love sports, and just to have a chance to be with you in your podcast, I'm really honored. Thank you.
Well, thanks. You really have quite a story to tell, too. You're tremendously successful at what you do, but take me back to when you were a kid, just a young kid. And I know you grew up Catholic.
Well,
okay. And the whole thing is what was your family life like back then? Was it a very religious-oriented family life? Did you have a strong faith in the family at that time?
Well, my mom and dad conceived me at a unsupervised party in Leawood, Kansas when they were in high school. And so it's funny, I work in Leawood now, but,
that's right.
But that's where I got my start. And Dad was Catholic, Mom was Church of Christ, a more fundamentalist Christian faith. And my mom's mother had taken her life about a year before that. And so there was a lot of trauma.
Right.
And so they conceived me at this party. They ended up getting married, moved to Tucson, Arizona. I was baptized Catholic. Dad was Catholic. And my grandmother, so my mom and dad, because they didn't agree about religion back in 1964, they were like, Catholics and Church of Christ were like, they were like oil and water in some ways.
Right.
And so they kind of resolved the religion dilemma by not going to church at all at that time, early on. But my grandmother here in Kansas City, she lived in the Waldo area. And every time we were in town, and then when we moved back to Kansas City and when I was 6, she would take me to Mass. We'd go play bingo with the nuns on Friday night. She'd take me to light candles. She gave me my first Bible, taught me to pray the rosary. And I will always have a deep love, both for her faith, but also for her for sharing the faith with me.
Yeah, right. And so that is where you basically got the beginnings of your faith and where you ended up.
Well, and then my parents ended up, because they were so opposites, they tried to find something. They started struggling in their marriage, tried to find something between more conservative Christianity and Catholicism, and they ended up in a Methodist church, which is, Methodists often talk about themselves as the via media, or the middle way between, or bridge builder between different places. Right. And so anyway, we went to a Methodist church for a few years as a kid, dropped out when my parents got divorced, and then came back to faith in high school. Yeah,
right. And you've always been sort of a centrist too. You've always been a guy, and I've told you, you go into Church of Resurrection. I've been there more times than I can count for funerals and for some of your seminars or whatever. We did a drug seminar, and I was with Tom Langhofer. We did about in your recovery ministries with losing a child, which we don't want anyone to join that fraternity, but people
do. It
experience
happens.
The same thing. So I've always experienced that. The problem is the church you were brought up in with your grandma. The Catholic religion wasn't really a lot about that. I mean, Catholic religion was sort of they're sort of narrow focused. The arms sometimes aren't quite as wide open as they are at the Church of Resurrection.
Well, and that kind of hinges on who the priest is, and I think about Vatican II. Opened the doors a bit and said, okay, wait, the Protestants are our lesser brothers and sisters, but they're still our brothers and sisters. And
I like that, lesser brothers and sisters.
We put Pope John the 23rd up in our stained glass window for acknowledging that we were at least in the family, even if we were out. We were lesser brothers and sisters. But Pope Francis and a lot of others have been, and a lot of priests here in Kansas City, I think, have been that more open to say, look, we think we have the right path. We've got it figured out better than the rest of you, but we're open to everybody else. And I think that's understandable. You know, I'm a United Methodist because I think, you know, we got some things right, but we don't think we're the best church out there. We don't think we're the right church for everyone. But, you know, I have a deep love for the Catholic Church, and the Catholic priests in our community, and those that I know anyway are just terrific people.
So where did it start that you thought that maybe religion and being a pastor was in your? Did you ever think about becoming a priest?
I actually did. So I was an atheist for just a couple of years. Probably my grandma.
So you did have some doubts.
I did. I had some doubts. My grandmother, she passed away of cancer, and as such a pivotal force in my faith life, that really undermined my faith when I was in, I was in 8th grade when she died. My parents got divorced in 7th grade, and so both those things led me to asking questions. And, you know, I found myself saying, God, if you're real, prove yourself to me. And I never saw any proof. And so I said, okay, I don't believe in you. And it was as a freshman in high school, somebody was going door to door inviting people to church. I don't know why I went, but I decided to go. It was a little Pentecostal church, very different from anything I'd ever been to in my life. Hands raised, people speaking in tongues. And it was like, would have freaked me out, and I would have never gone back. But they had three really cute girls on the front row of the church. And while at the time I didn't believe in God, I did believe in girls. And I thought, okay, I'm interested. And I started going back, and you know, they hooked me. I ultimately, you know, found, okay, I really want to follow Jesus. And so that was kind of the beginning of that. By the time I was a junior in high school, I was leading.
You're at Blue Valley High.
At Blue Valley High School, yeah. I grew up in Prairie Village, but then moved out to Blue Valley my freshman year in high school. And it was there that as a junior in high school, I was leading Bible studies. I was, you know, doing a lot as head of the youth group and teaching children's Sunday school. And somebody said, you know, God has a calling on your life. You're going to be a pastor. And I'm like, no, I'm not. I'm going to be a doctor or a lawyer, but not a pastor. And the pastor asked me one Sunday, would you preach on a Sunday night service for me? And I was 16, and I thought I knew more about everything than almost anybody. So I thought, well, how hard can that be? And I preached, and it was horrible. The sermon was terrible. But I was embarrassed by it. But when I was finished, I thought, I think this is what I was made for. I think I'm supposed to do this, and I can get better at it. And so I was 16 when I felt called and went off to college. My wife and I got married the week after high school graduation. So we were 17 and 18.
Roberts, right?
Went to Oral Roberts, and it was there. Oral at the time had become United Methodist, and he'd been Pentecostal, but he joined the United Methodist Church eventually. And this idea of uniting the intellect and the heart, and so it was there that I, you know, started. I really had a faith struggle once more because 2 of my best friends died in an accident, and I began having all kinds of questions about where is God now, and did God make this happen? And it was during that year, my freshman year in college, when I was studying the doctrine of providence. How does God work in the world? And the question of theodicy, how do we make sense of suffering? I mean, you've been in this place, you lost your son, and it raises lots of questions. And it was at the end of that year, some answers started to make sense, and those answers came from some United Methodist theologians. And I thought, And Methodism started on the campus of Oxford University in the 1700s, and always believed in uniting the intellect and the heart, that you were to be a critical thinker. God isn't offended by our questions or our doubts. And I found myself drawn to that. And so by the time I was 18 in my freshman year in college, I joined the United Methodist Church and then went to graduate school at SMU, Southern Methodist University.
Yeah, right.
And there I had this dream of wanting to start a church for thinking people, for critical thinkers who, for whatever reason, had opted out of church. They just said, you know, this doesn't make sense. They'd had the same feelings I did after a tragic loss. And I thought, I want to start a church for those people. And that's how Resurrection came about.
Did you ever go back to high school just for a minute? Because you were into your subjects and study, so I don't think you probably experienced this much in college. But was there ever a point where the kids would, you know, the other kids in school who weren't into this sort of thing, the faith-based anything, at that point you're in high school, you know, you have the drinking parties on Friday night and after the football games or whatever. Was there ever any bullying, or was there any guy, you know, people look at you and, oh, that's those guys?
Yeah, no, you know, it's funny. There wasn't actually. It was kind of the opposite. I did play sports. I was, and I remember at the time, you know, this sounds strange today, but I carried my Bible around with me. Yeah, actually, I carry a Bible with me everywhere I go. It's in my back pocket now, a little one, but I carried this big Bible with me to class everywhere I went, and you know, and people eventually kind of knew, okay, here's, you know, okay, Adam, if they knew me, I wasn't that popular, but I would find out.
You're still looking for the cute girls, though.
I was.
So, yeah, right. Okay.
I was.
All right, I just want to keep that straight.
Exactly. Well, I was. But what was funny is I'd be sitting at lunch, you know, and I'd have somebody come up and sit down and talk to me. That, like, I didn't know that they'd know who I was. And they're like, I'm really struggling with some things, and I know you're a Christian. Can I talk to you about it? Wow. It was kind of an interesting thing, as they felt like they would be loved and accepted, I think. And so I never felt bullied for my faith. I'm sure there were people who would have made fun of it, but yeah. And, my freshman year was when I was partying, and then by the time I got serious about my faith, that all began to change a little bit.
Yeah, right. And I think that the kids could probably reach out to you, knowing what you're like when you're a freshman. All of a sudden you're like this, and how'd that change, especially then, where they're all looking for answers.
Yeah.
I mean, we're all looking for something when you're that age, right?
Yeah,
So,
that's right. Yeah. That's exactly right.
And then, so things carry through college, and you get you get your Master of Divinity at SMU.
Yeah.
So you come out of college, and what are you thinking? I'm going to become a pastor, or did you start as an assistant pastor somewhere?
Yeah. Well, I started as a youth pastor while I was in college.
Right.
Actually, my freshman year or my senior year of college, through graduate school, I was a youth pastor, and I was ordained right out of seminary, and I served as an associate pastor at Central United Methodist at 52nd and Brookside, what's now Resurrection Brookside. But the whole time I kept telling my bishop, what I really want to do is start a church. I'd like to start a church in the south part of Kansas City. I'd like to start it for, people, critical thinkers, who don't go to church. And eventually in 1990, they called and said, okay, we have no money, we have no people, we have no land, we have no place for you to meet. But if you really want to start a church, we're going to send you out there to go do it. And they paid my salary for 1 year. And they said, we're going to give you a 20% pay cut at the end of a year. So you either find people or you starve. And I was, I had 2 little children by that time, but off we went, and it's
in your first, I guess, sojourn into this, there's 4 people, and you're in a funeral chapel,
that's right.
Jim
McGilly. So Jim McGilly was opening a McGilly Chapel on 123rd and State Line, and heard we were starting in a church. The Kansas City Star had a little article in there about it. And I had been looking for a place to meet, and all the schools were filled with churches, and we had no money to rent up space. And so I saw they were opening the funeral home, and I called, and I said, I'd like to take you to lunch. And he said, well, it's funny, I want to take you to lunch. And so we went to lunch, and I was going to give him this sales pitch on why we should, why he should let us use their funeral home. All of our members are going to die someday. They're going to need your services. And it'll be good for your future business.
You scratch my back, I'll scratch yours.
Exactly. And before I could say a word, and I was going to offer to split the offerings, whatever they were, if they were $200 a week, we'd give $100 a week to the funeral home. Before I could say a word, he said, okay, I know this is going to sound like a crazy idea, but I wonder if you'd consider having your church meet in our funeral home. And I said, well, I don't know. Tell me more about what you have in mind. And he started trying to sell me on having the church in the funeral home. And by the time we were finished, I drove by to look at it, and it was beautiful. And I said, it just felt like God had opened the door for something. Mm-hmm. And it was, and he offered it to us free of charge. And I'll never forget that. And I'd just be grateful. I'm so grateful for that. And Jim passed away a couple of years ago, but how grateful I am for his willingness. And as a Catholic, to say, hey, we want, you're a Methodist, but we want you to come start in our funeral home. That's and so it was great. It was really, and, it was interesting. We'd show up on Saturdays, and sometimes there would be somebody lying in state for a funeral the next day. And this didn't happen very often, but so we'd have to close the lid of the casket. I mean, the funeral director would come, and we'd take them to the casket storage room or something, and then we'd set it up as a chapel and put out real estate signs. And, And it was crazy. And we started with about 90 people that first month.
You did?
Yeah, we had about 90 people.
But you started with 4 people. Was that just you and?
Yeah, my wife and I and our 2 children.
So they were the 4 people.
Yeah, they were the 4 people.
My
yeah. And then by the time summer was over, that first summer, we had about 20 people in the core group who said, hey, I'd go visit them, and they'd say, we'd like to be a part of it. And then when we first started in October of 1990, that month we averaged about 90 people.
Wow. Wow, that's great. And so that is, LaVon, your wife, and of course, Rebecca and Danielle. Your 2 daughters. So we'll talk about them as we go along. So you start that. So you go from a church with 4 people in it, and it's your family.
Yep.
And now you have a church that has virtually 24,000 people involved in Church of the Resurrection. You go from 4 to 24,000 people. That's incredible. And I know it's from they're not all Methodists. I mean, they came over and they joined the church, and they might be Methodist now, but they were definitely from different religions.
All kinds. And we've, our focus has been on trying to connect with people who don't go to church. So what we said is, don't invite your friends who go to church somewhere else. Let them go to their church. Let's find people who have dropped out of church. And there's a whole lot of people who used to go to church but have dropped out.
Yeah.
And
for various reasons.
For various reasons, right, exactly. And so about 2/3 of our people who joined were not actively involved in their faith before they came to Resurrection, which has been exciting for us. And then all of their friends, that didn't go to church somewhere, they started inviting them, and that's kind of how it happened. And the third that did go to church somewhere else, sometimes they were from churches here in Kansas City, but sometimes they were people who moved to Kansas City and they began looking for a church. And so it's been an amazing adventure.
Did they just get it from word of mouth? Was it from other people that they knew and maybe in their parish or whatever? They don't go to church anymore, but they went to church and said, hey, you should come join us?
Right. That's just like anything. That's the best marketing is word of mouth. Sure. When somebody can tell their friends, I'm going to this church or I go to this thing but when it comes to church, I go to this church and it's really impacted my life, or I really love it. You want to come with me? But we also send out direct mail pieces to the community. Today we use radio advertising sometimes and TV advertising sometimes, billboards from time to time. But it really mostly is one person telling another person, "Hey, I found this to really impact my life in a positive way. Would you like to come with me?"
Yeah. And so that would reinforce everything you were doing.
Yeah.
I mean, I did choose the right path for me.
Yeah.
It was back from those days when I had lost my faith to this. It was just incredible.
Exactly.
And to reach out and touch so many people has to be very satisfying.
It's really gratifying. It's surprising. I never expected this. I'd never been to a church with more than 300 people. Right. So I didn't. It wasn't.
Most people haven't, by the way.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, the average church size in America is like 50 or 60.
Right.
And so it was never like, I want us to have this goal of having this many people. It was just, let's do whatever it takes to love as many people as we can and to welcome them, and then let's see what happens. And it has been a very exciting, enriching, and rewarding experience.
Yeah. So walk me through McGilley's Chapel to Core.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Where else? What were the steps? Because I know you didn't go from the 4 people at McGilley's or the whatever it was to 24. Well, they're not, because you have 9.
We have 9 locations.
You have 9 locations. You call it
yeah.
9 campuses across Kansas City, but
Yeah.
Core is the main campus.
Yeah, the Leeward one is. Yeah.
How did that happen?
Well, I'll tell you that. So people ask me this all the time, like, "What's the secret sauce?" And I want to share. I thought I'd just share with you because your audience may find this interesting. And when I share this, people, I usually have people say, "Well, that's true in my business. That's true in sports. It's true in almost anything." But so these are like 6 principles. I'll just share them really quickly. One is it's all about people. It's all about people and relationships. And you're so good at this, Frank. You have always been such a friendly, outgoing, gregarious person. And people are drawn to you for that reason. And they want to hear you when you speak because it's about human beings. It's about people. When it's not about you, but it's about other people and you're trying to serve and care for them, that goes a long way. And so from the beginning it was like, okay, we're going to do whatever it takes to care for people. We're going to minister to them. We're going to love on them. And when we started to this day, a first-time visitor, if they sign in, Sunday afternoon, we'll deliver a coffee mug to them. So I brought a coffee mug for you.
You got a coffee mug somewhere.
So we still do this. We call it mugging people. So at Resurrection, we mug people. And every year we come up with a different coffee mug. This is our current year, do unto others, based on the golden rule. And so I would just show up at people's door on Sunday afternoon, and they'd look like, oh, crud, I should have never given them my name and address. And I'd say, don't worry, I don't want to come in. I just wanted to say, we're so glad you visited today. And, if you have any questions, let me know. And if they did, I'd talk to them. I'd just stand on the doorstep, and then I would say, I just want you to know this. If you don't have a church family, I'd be honored to be your pastor. We would really love for you to come to Resurrection. Now, this coffee, you're Catholic. I'm not giving this to you to get you to come to Resurrection, but that's for you. And, but I do that. It'd take all of 3 or 4 minutes to be on their doorstep. But when I was there, the next Sunday, I remembered their name. And if I remembered their name and said, hey, Frank, it's great to see you again today, they were going to join the church. Mm-hmm. And they were not because of my superior theological arguments, but because I cared about them. And if I cared enough to remember their name, they would start coming, and eventually they would go, there's something to this Christianity thing. Mm-hmm. But it starts with that relationship. So it's all about people is the first thing. The second is a clarity of MVP. And MVP here is not most valuable player, but mission, vision, and plan. Like, why do you exist? And at Resurrection, we always said we exist to build a Christian community where non-religious and nominally religious people are becoming deeply committed Christians. We eat, sleep, drink, and breathe that. That is why we exist. And so we're constantly asking, how can we do that? And then our vision is to be used by God to see people's lives changed, to strengthen other churches. So we really care about helping other churches and to transform the world. So it looks like the kingdom of God. And then this idea, and you may be familiar with Ron Heifetz at Harvard's.
Yes.
Yeah. So, Ron, he had a book called Leadership Without Easy Answers.
That's right.
And there's this one thing he talks about in there where he talks about, okay, here's the task of the leader, is to survey the world as it is, and then to imagine what is the world supposed to be like. And so, and he did this in the form of like a line. So here's the world as it is, and here's the world as it's supposed to be. And he says the task is to close the gap. And to me, that's what Jesus was doing. He talked about the kingdom of God, and he said the world's supposed to be a place where people care for each other, where they love one another, they forgive, where you feed the hungry and care for the naked, and you visit the prisoners. And so this idea of closing the gap.
Right, which is humanity.
Yeah.
It's not really religion for all practical purposes. It's humanity.
Exactly.
It's morality as well. You know what I mean? Just if somebody is suffering, it's good to reach out a hand and try to pick that
exactly.
person up.
And then you feel better too, because this is what you're part of what you were made for. And so we just found when it came to the church, we were going to try to imagine what would Kansas City look like if it looked like it really should look. Kansas City is an awesome city. We love it. I love the city. But to think about what could be better. And so we, early on we talked about, well, we're a city racially divided, or where's there poverty in Kansas City, or the Kansas City, Missouri public schools when they were struggling. And so we're constantly asking, how can we as a church, help
KC?
Help KC.
Help where we live.
Yeah.
Yeah, because you don't have to look at it for a worldview.
Right.
Because then you get lost in the whatever means not there. Right?
Yeah.
But you're looking at it in a narrow focus and just trying to do what you can do where you are.
That's exactly right. And everybody, you use your influence. So like you have such a huge really influence because of all your years of serving here in Kansas City and broadcasting. But you've also said, I want to use that for good. I want to actually help Kansas City also look like the kingdom of God, or look like it's supposed to look, and help humans look like that. So that was part of what we, all along the way we had this idea, and we started out, we said and we were like a little tiny church with nothing. We didn't even have enough to pay the bills, but we said, we're going to give the first 25% of what comes in the offering plate to serve outside our walls, people who are hungry or thirsty or whatever. And then one of the principles has been change, innovate, improve, or die. And this is where I have a show and tell for you.
Go ahead.
So I have in this box my very first computer that I bought in 1985, and maybe some of your audience might recognize this. I'm going to put this right over here for a second.
Not that doesn't break a lot of people out in a cold sweat. Okay,
exactly.
Look at that.
So that was my Mac 512 I bought my freshman year in seminary, my first year in seminary. And it still runs. I start it up once in a while. It'll boot up Microsoft Word version 1.0 in 10 minutes flat. It's just like
takes 10 minutes to boot it.
Oh yeah, the thing was slow as molasses. But the year they built it, they couldn't make enough of them. Apple could not make enough of these Macintoshes.
And 10 minutes back in those days was like, this is a miracle.
It was a miracle. And
instead of 10 seconds, why isn't my computer?
Yeah. I mean, it was just amazing. But I tell people, imagine if Apple had said, we just built the best computer ever. We don't have to build any others. We don't have to. We'll just keep building this forever, and Apple would be, in the dustbin of corporate America. But instead, they kept saying, "How do we do it better? How do we improve and innovate?" And I think about, eventually, I've got an iPhone here, and this company decided we're not going to make that computer anymore. We're going to make a different one. And then they eventually said, well, let's make pocket computers, and so we said the same thing as a church. Just how can we do it better? How can we're going to keep the same mission and our theology is the same, but how do we constantly ask, what do we need to do to reach new generations, new people?
Right.
And then whatever it takes is a fifth one. And I'll just mention that briefly because I've got a baseball card I want to tie into this. But whatever it takes is the idea that, and I learned this from a Franklin time management course where they said the successful business will do the things an unsuccessful business is not willing to do. The successful business person will do this. And I thought, well, the successful pastor or the successful church, however you define success, is going to do the things other people aren't willing to do.
Right.
And so it's like, whatever it takes, we're going to try to do whatever it takes. And I remember we had a family who visited our church, and they had a special needs child. We were really small at the time. And they said, you're too small probably to be our church because we need special need. We need somebody one-on-one with our child. And we said, we'll do whatever it takes to be your church. If you'll just tell us what we need, we'll start the ministry in 2 weeks. Mm-hmm. And today we have like 400 special needs children and adults who are part of our congregation. But it starts with that commitment. And I remember another family came who had an autistic child, and they said their child cried the whole time through nursery, a little guy. And I went to their house to deliver a coffee mug and say, I'm so sorry, we didn't get it right. Please help us know how we can better care for your child. And this woman started crying on the doorstep, and she said, I visited 6 churches. And they all told us that they couldn't accommodate our needs. Our son has a special disorder, and you're the first pastor. First of all, you showed up at our doorstep, and then you said you want to do whatever it takes to be our church. And anyway, that I still see them 35 years later, 33 years later. But so, and the last thing I'll just
go ahead.
Well, the last thing I'll mention is don't give up, and this idea of not giving up. And you've faced opposition. You may have never been fired from a job, but you've had places where there were things that were hard or difficult or criticism or whatever. And the idea of not giving up, but you just keep going. And that's where this baseball card. So I collect old baseball cards. And this is Satchel Paige's rookie card.
Okay, and so of course he said, "No, Frank, I'm not giving you this card."
Yeah, sorry.
I do not blame you for that. That is phenomenal.
Yeah.
Satchel Paige's rookie card.
He played for the Kansas City Monarchs.
Yes,
he
did.
He played his last game in professional baseball, in Major League Baseball, was here in Kansas City.
Yeah, it was.
You remember this?
Yeah, right,
At
exactly.
the old Memorial Stadium. And he was 59 years old. And
supposedly.
Supposedly.
Nobody really knew how old he was.
Exactly.
He could have been 69
Exactly,
years old.
exactly. And he I think he struck out 2 or 3 people. He played 2 innings, I think. Struck
Yes,
out a
he
couple
did.
of people, and retired 5 of the 6. And it was just amazing. But the thing is, that guy never gave up.
Yeah.
He never gave up.
All he'd been through.
All he'd been through. And, should have been the first player in the major leagues instead of Jackie Robinson. But Jackie, it just happened to be kind of how it worked out that year. Jackie was amazing, too.
I think it was personality, too, with Jackie. Jackie was,
Yep.
they knew he had thick skin, he could take the abuse. And
That's right.
Because they knew he was going to be just, it's going to be a lot of racist epithets
that's
thrown
right.
From the,
That's
thrown
right.
from the stands at him.
Yeah. But when I look at this card, and I have Jackie Robinson's rookie card at home, too. But when I look at these cards, I just think, these guys never gave up. And so, when life gets hard, and all of these things are things that Jesus did too. I mean, if I look at them, they're all a part of that. So anyway,
and all these things are that business incorporate.
Yeah, this is any line of
Successful
work.
businesses are all on that same
Exactly.
plane. Yeah, maybe not. They don't talk about Jesus or
Right.
Christianity or whatever,
Right.
but they talk about those principles.
That's right.
That's that's the way to build a successful business.
Yeah,
The other way is to go from this booting up in 10 minutes to your phone because you have embraced social media.
Yeah, oh, yeah,
I mean,
yeah.
you have you have 30 books out there, but all of your sermons are online.
Yep.
You can see your church services are online.
Yep.
You can see the services in person. You can see them online. You're on TV. You're on 38 to Spot.
Yep.
You're on KSMO 62 as well.
Yep.
So you have really embraced that part of it so that you really don't have to come to one of the, to one of the, I always
the locations or
campuses.
campuses, yeah.
You can, or the core in Leawood, you can watch this on television and get the same thing out of it. And there's no guilt there. I was born and raised Catholic, and you were as well. And there's a lot of guilt in that religion. There's a lot of guilt.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm guilty right now. So you're making me guilty, but it's okay. I understand.
No.
But but that's that's the way it is. Too.
Well, it is, and part of that's a challenge. Before COVID, we'd started online. We started it about 14 years ago, I think, 12 years ago. And part of what we said is there are an increasing number of people who are not going to darken the door of the church. So we can either ignore them, or we can try to find some way to reach out to them. Yeah. And in the past, it was radio and TV, and we found online was really, we weren't even going to do TV. That happened during COVID when one of the stations said, well, we'll let you broadcast your Easter service. And we were like, okay. And then we had like 40,000 people, 50,000 people join on that Easter service. Whoa, we missed out on something here. But so what we say is it's okay to join us this way. And at the same time, we think if people are able to, there's something happens when you get together with other people. And we really, our hope is people might come in person.
Sure.
But the starting point for many people, I mean, almost every person who joins our church today tells me, we started by watching you on TV, or we started by watching you online. And so we're really grateful for the technology and the chance for people to have that experience. We try to really do a great job with that. We record the services in advance so they can be closed captioned for the hearing impaired. And I look right into the camera, so I'm not looking around at the congregation. I'm looking right in the camera, imagining the congregation sitting at home in their pajamas with their cup of coffee.
Oh, boy. Yeah.
Well, I don't imagine them in their pajamas, but I mean, I imagine I'm talking to these
I'm going to
people.
get off that subject real quick here, okay?
Exactly.
We won't reimagine what's going on back at home.
Yeah, exactly.
It's great. But the whole thing is and you reached out to this and took on the TV thing, but the television stations, which you probably learned, have to do X amount of minutes or hours on religion-based things. And you just said, hey, you put your hand up and said, "Yeah, I'll be there."
Yeah, yeah. And so we're on 2 stations here in Kansas City, 8 and 11 on the spot on KMCI,
right,
and 9 o'clock on KSMO on
Channel 62.
Channel 62. And so we're really grateful to have a chance to do that, and we pay for it. We pay for those spots, but we're it's just a great opportunity, and for a lot of people, especially with an aging population. So my mom, she can't drive anymore, so she's able to still join us for worship by having the TV, and that's true for a lot of people. We have people in prisons, we have people on, and then again, just folks who, for whatever reason, they didn't make it to church that Sunday, or they aren't quite ready to go back in person yet, but they're looking, they're searching for something.
Yeah. So, future for you and for the Church of Resurrection. Do you have somebody? I know you have so many ministers and ministries and people that work for you now at Church of the Resurrection.
Yeah.
Do you have is there a lineage there? Is there someone that will take over for you? And I know you're nowhere near being done, and I think you'll do it until basically the day you die.
Well,
I just think you probably will. You're not going to move to Honolulu anytime soon.
That's true.
Okay, yeah.
But I do actually. My plan is to retire on the 40th anniversary of my first sermon at Resurrection. So
when would that be?
It's going to be October 13th, I think, of 2030. So 5 years. And so part of what we're doing right now is spending the next 5 years getting ready for that transition. And we have some amazing pastors on our staff, and we also, we have a succession planning team that includes people who did this for Hallmark and others, and looking to see who would be a good fit for Resurrection. What's the character? What's a person's character? What's their giftedness? And I'm convinced there are people out there who will bring gifts that I don't have and will take Resurrection to a different level. And I had the joy of being the founding pastor. That's really, I love this job. I love the people. And I'm still going to be around. So when I retire, I'm still going to be doing stuff. And I'll be writing books, and I'll be, hopefully they'll let me do a few things around the church after that.
And I know you'll come marching in the front door if it's not being done right, too.
Well, exactly. But I feel confident. We have such great people. Both our lay people and our lay leaders are amazing, and our staff I'm just so proud of them. They're remarkable. And I think our people know this is who we are and this is why we're here. And we appreciate our senior pastor, but we're not here only because our senior pastor. We're here because of who Christ is and who we're trying to be as a church.
Yeah. Much bigger than
it's bigger than one person.
Pastor.
Way bigger. Right. Yeah.
Do you still have doubts?
Oh, listen, everybody has doubts. In fact, I wrote a book. I brought you a copy of it. It's called Wrestling with Doubt, Finding Faith. This came out last year, and it just looks at 6 or 7 doubts that many people wrestle with. And I actually wish more Christians. It sounds weird, but I wish that some Christians would struggle with doubt a little bit more. Mm-hmm. There are people out there who are so certain about things.
They have blind faith.
Yeah, blind faith and black and white thinking, and there's a place for us to go. So I tell people, I can't prove to you 100% anything I teach. I can give you I can make a good case for it. I can tell you about my experience of it. I can tell you why I believe it. And at the same time, at some point, faith is a decision. To become a Catholic or a Methodist, and underneath that really is the more fundamental thing, is to become a follower of Jesus. Mm-hmm. You are, I am, doesn't matter what the label is we have in our church, we're following Jesus. And at or believing in God, just being a theist. If you believe in God, I can give you good reasons for believing, but at the same time, there's always some moment where you make a decision. Okay, between these two, I still have to decide. I don't believe in God, or I do believe in God. Mm-hmm. I do believe in Jesus and want to follow him, or I don't. And I don't think we have to be afraid of our doubts. Doubt, I always think, it's questions, and those questions can lead us to a deeper faith, a more profound faith. And I think, for me, to be able to live with both deep faith, deep trust, and the knowledge that I could be wrong about this. I don't think I am. I have all kinds of reasons to believe in my experiences of God and what I theologically and philosophically, the arguments I have. But I might be wrong. Mm-hmm. But I've told people, even if I'm wrong, so if I get to the end and the last glimmer of consciousness and I realize this is it, I'm still going to be glad to have followed Jesus in my life. And I still will think that was a better way for me to live my life than to have lived as though I had no faith and there was no God. Now, I firmly expect when I die, I'm going to see him face to face. And I'm going to, counting on the fact that I'm going to have a chance to be in that realm that he talked about, where he's prepared a place for us. But in the end, faith, like anything else, there's always going to be doubt. And I tell people about marriage. So we got married the week after high school graduation. It was the dumbest thing you could do. But
That's amazing.
so we were 17 and 18 years old. We've been married now 43 years. And I remember the night before, I had all these doubts, like, okay. And I thought, I'm 87.3% sure I'm supposed to marry LaVon, but I am 16.7% not sure and think this is going to be a disaster.
Right, exactly.
And so that's how it is with everything. I get in my car and I think I could die in a car crash today,
Yeah.
or I might not. I'm going to live like I'm not going to. I get on an airplane. My dad worked for the Boeing company, and I've been inside the engines of planes, but I still don't fully understand the physics of how those things get off the ground.
I'm a little worried about those airplanes.
Well, yeah,
right now, anyway,
especially.
So. Yeah.
But you still get on. You go, okay,
Sure.
there's enough reason for me to get on and trust that this plane's going to
Exactly
fly.
right. It's like getting on an amusement ride somewhere.
Yep.
And go, it won't fly off the tracks. Honest, it won't.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so I think that's how faith works. It's like it's okay to have doubts, and I think doubt, is partly about curiosity, and partly it's about making sure that you're not just believing things just because somebody told you. I think we should test things. We should question things, and this is one of the things that kind of defines our church and a lot of churches. I mean, Catholics are great at this too, but this idea of a faith for critical thinkers. So Jesus said we're to love God, and Jesus is quoting Moses, but he adds something to this. We're to love God with our whole heart, soul, mind, and strength. And the Greek word for mind is dianoia. And dianoia is not just, with some of your thoughts.
Right.
It actually implies critical thinking or weighing things carefully. Jesus said we're to love God by weighing things carefully in our minds. And that's where I think the intellect comes in. That's where at Resurrection we tell people, don't check your brain at the door. It's okay to have questions. God isn't offended by your questions. Jesus had questions.
Yeah.
He hangs on the cross and
Why
says,
me?
my God, right, exactly. And the psalmist had questions. And so, I think doubt is not the enemy of faith. It can be a pathway to a really deeper faith.
Right. And you've been tremendously successful with this and have helped so many different people in so many different walks of life that, it has to be totally inspiring for you. But when you came out of SMU, and I know you were from here, but you could have opened this church. You could have gone to a funeral home anywhere in the country with their little chapel in the background. But you came back home.
Yep.
Talk about your thoughts about this city and this area that you call home and have never turned your back on and never walked away from.
Well, this is what I love about your podcast, because I really do love this city. Again, my parents, my grandparents, my great-grandparents were here in Kansas City. I love the character of Kansas City. I love the people in Kansas City. There's something about, as your podcast says, there's something about Kansas City, and part of it's, again, it's the people. So we sit in the middle of the country between the coasts. I love the coast too, but there's a sort of sense of, first of all, friendliness and warmth, which I find different than, even Kansas City, Missouri versus St. Louis is different.
Yeah, right.
The feeling.
And don't go to Philly. Anytime soon.
Yeah,
Okay,
exactly.
go ahead.
So there's that warmth and friendliness. We look at each other when we're walking down the street and smile and say hi. I go around the world and, man, a lot of places, they don't smile when they look at each other. They don't say hello. We initiate conversations. We care about each other. We're looking at ways that we can help each other. And, I love that about Kansas City. I love the fact that, we straddle a state line, and so that sometimes divides us, but we're united by, even though we're in different states, we love the Chiefs, we love the Royals, we love the Kansas City Currents, we love our other sports teams. There's something about this bridge building coming together. Mm-hmm. And, at Resurrection, we're a church, we're 40% Republican, 40% Democrat, 20% independent. And, even though we disagree about some things, we go, but I still love you. And I think Kansas City models that for the rest of the world. And so,
no fights in the lobby after
exactly.
the sermon on Sunday, right?
Exactly. Well, occasionally they happen, but not very often.
The voices get raised just a little, right?
Yeah. But I think this is a remarkable place, and it's a great place. We have people who moved here, and they came from, often, people move to the similar kinds of cities in Denver, Highlands Ranch, or in Dallas, it's Plano or Richardson or whatever, and they come to Kansas City and they don't leave, and they say, this is such a great place to raise our kids. The city is just a warm and wonderful. It's large enough to have, the kind of resources you have in a big city, but it feels like a smaller town.
Yeah, right.
And I'm very proud to say I'm from Kansas City. I love this place.
Yeah, it's a great. We love it too. That's obvious. And I always say at the end of when I do speaking engagements every once in a while, and I've been to your ministries out there as well. With Tom Langhofer, a good friend of mine, and we
one
both
of our
lost
pastors.
a child.
Yeah.
Yes,
his daughter was killed at the First Fridays a few years ago, and heads up our recovery ministry.
Yeah, by ricochet. Just one of those things that would shake your faith.
Yes.
And I lost my son. I shook my faith. But
yeah, it's okay. You don't ever
wasn't gonna
really
do
get over
this.
that, do you? It's
Ben brought this in for a reason. I always tell people at the end, I say, I had an issue with Brett. We had issues, a lot of issues.
yeah.
And so before he died, thank God, we reconciled.
Oh,
So it was like one of those things. So I always tell people, you just don't know. You have if you have issues with your mom or dad, your brother, your uncle, your aunt, your best friend, whatever. Try to reconcile those differences before you die.
Yeah.
Reach out, and if they don't reach back, that's their problem.
Yeah.
But at least for you, reach out and try to bring them back into your life somehow, some way.
So did you initiate that, or did he initiate that? The reaching out?
No, I did.
Yeah.
I reached it out.
That's how it usually works.
It was it was an issue. One of the last things. No, this was before. This is when we really had an issue. Gosh, I guess I could tell the story. But
Do please. I'd like to hear it.
We had to. He was into drugs when he was young. He was under the age of 16, and he had some at the house. And I couldn't handle it anymore. I just didn't know what to do. So I took him to the police station and said, I can't do anything. He's yours. And like giving up as a father. But as he walked through the door and they shut the door behind him, he turned around and said, I hate you. And for the next 22 days, he wasn't with us. He was in the juvenile detention center. And but he came out and he changed his life and started to get turned around and got back into being the kid that we knew with his personality and everything else. And he moved away from home and he ended up in New Mexico. That's where he died in an automobile accident. He had a stroke. And he had an automobile accident, one car, nobody else involved, just him. But before that, all the way up from the time he basically moved away to, I'd communicate with him, called him on the phone, talked to him, sent him letters, sent him a little money every once in a while because you always know a kid can use it. But that was one of those deals, and we reconciled from that period on. But I often thought about that, and when I go to do a ministry like yours, or we have a charity thing or whatever, I try to tell the people, hey, you've got to get this rectified, because if someone dies and you haven't tried, you will be devastated.
Yeah.
You'll be totally devastated. So.
Frank, that's actually my sermon this Sunday. So I'm in a 3-part series on forgiveness on a book based on a book I wrote. And I'm talking about estrangement and why it's so important to try to reach back. And because I see this all the time with people, and not giving up, that you keep trying.
Yeah, keep trying.
Yeah.
Because it's up to them really to reach, but you can't force anybody to reach back.
Yeah.
So, but if you don't ever, in the two of you turn your backs to one another, that problem, then it just never gets reconciled, and there's always that.
Well, imagine if you hadn't reconciled and your son died in that car accident,
gosh.
How much you just live with the.
It would just be, yeah.
Frank, I'm so sorry for your son's loss, and I'm so grateful that you reconciled and that you practiced tough love. You did something that was really hard because you cared about him.
Yeah.
And
that's what we talked about with Tom.
Yeah.
Laying off about losing a child, and someone have lost their kids through drugs.
Yeah, that's right.
Alcohol, whatever, suicide for whatever reason, bullying. We talked about that a little bit as well, but it's just, it's something. So that's
Frank, thank you for
that's the end of that. Yeah.
Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, you bet.
This is one of those things too, where I think again our faith, and for Christians, this idea that Jesus' resurrection. We say this a lot at church. The resurrection. Jesus' resurrection means the worst thing is never the last thing, and that death doesn't get to have the final word, and that one day you're going to see your son again, and that the realm that he's in, Isaiah 25 describes heaven as a wedding banquet and a party, a celebration, and Revelation picks up that same idea.
He liked to party.
Yeah. And Revelation picks up the same idea, a place where there's no more sorrow or suffering or pain, and so even that, it doesn't take away the sting of death, but Paul says, it's swallowed up death and victory.
Yeah.
And anyway, I'm so sorry for your son's loss.
I know you are. And I know that's, I know that comes from the heart. But thanks so much for being here, sharing, And thanks for being in Kansas City.
Thank you, Frank. Thanks for devoting your life and your work here. You could have gone 1,000 other places.
Yeah, right.
And you said
well,
no.
thanks to Sarah, my wife.
Well, yay to Sarah. She's
right
back here in the back.
This is her idea. Yeah, exactly. So,
I love that.
What'd you put me out here for? I'm a mess. So that's just the way it is. Yeah, thanks.
Hey, Frank, thank
God
you
bless.
so much. God bless
God
you.
bless, yeah.
Appreciate you.
There's Just Something About Kansas City is a registered 501c3 nonprofit organization with the mission of documenting the stories that have built our city to inspire and educate generations to come. Our work is being made possible by the generous support of local partners like you. You can help us share these stories by becoming a sponsor today. Visit somethingaboutKC.org to learn more.